Today, we welcome Phillip McLamb, co-founder of Resident Culture Brewing Company in Charlotte, North Carolina. Resident Culture has been self-distributing since they opened their doors in 2017. And on today's episode, we get to hear his story and learn what it takes to operate this side of the business without using a distributor. I hope you enjoy the show. So, Phillip, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I am super pumped about our conversation.
Likewise. Always good to chat with you, Chris.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How are things going in Charlotte, North Carolina? What is the landscape right now?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's an interesting, it's sort of an interesting time. We're doing extraordinarily well on our distro and sort of brewery side of the business. We have a couple locations. One is struggling, doing fine, but struggling relative to where we were in 2022. And then the other one is, growing. And I think what we're realizing is the demographic of who your customer is matters a lot. And our OG production brewery, Plaza Midwood location, very prototypical brewery, food trucks and picnic tables and brewing equipment and sort of rustic feeling is doing really well. The tap room business is picking up. Our food truck business is picking up, and it's a much more secure customer base, I guess, if that makes sense. A lot of young families with secure jobs and a lot of kids running around here, and we actually have leaned into catering to young families. And I think it's worked out really well for us. And then our other location in a much hipper part of town in South End is it still does well, but it's down from 2022, which that's the story we're hearing all over the place, not just in South End or Charlotte, but in a lot of other cities as well. And but it's a little bit more fickle demographic and customer base over there. So we gotta scrap and work extra hard to make sure we give people a reason to come to that tap room. So, but overall, I think we feel fortunate to have the brand that we have, and and be in the position we are. We sadly are hearing of more and more breweries closing, and another North Carolina brewery that we're friends with recently shut down, and it stinks to hear it. So
it's definitely interesting times. I've had a chance to visit both your locations, and you described them spot on. One does have the 2010 to 2012. I know you opened in 2017, but 2010 to 2012 feel, and real cozy, very, very rustic and great family space. And the other is very urban, and it has a lot going on. Your South End location has a lot going on. So
we took a really big swing, and we bit off a big chunk of space over there. I think in hindsight, I would have taken, a quarter of the space that we have, much smaller kitchen, just easier to manage situation. So, you learn in these, throughout these things. And I think we definitely learned a lot over there. And in looking for, a third location opportunity, we sort of know exactly what we want to do. We know exactly the size of the space we want, the type of neighborhood we want to be in. And 2 years of running our own large kitchen and event space and all this stuff, I think we sort of know the ins and outs of what will be I think a really successful third time for a location. So
third time's the charm.
I had that question.
That's right.
Oh, go ahead, Kim.
That was all.
I had that question thrown out to me recently, and someone asked, "Hey, if you open a brewery, what would it look like?" And I kind of beat around the bush on the answer, and the guy's like, "Dude, what would it look like?" And I said, 2,500 square feet, 300 square foot kitchen, 5 to 7 barrel brewing system, pilot system, and then some outdoor space in a suburban neighborhood.
Mhm.
And he was like, "Oh, thank you. That's
Yeah,
exactly what I was looking for." So while we've kicked off the show talking about retail, the real focus of today is your self-distro journey.
sure.
And you have been doing it since 2017 when you guys opened. And I want to learn more about that decision, and I want to learn more about what it looked like in the early days. So how did you decide to do self-distro from the get-go?
Yeah, I mean, so we one in North Carolina, it's allowed, and so we always knew it was going to be a piece of our business. We didn't really do it in earnest, um, actually, until COVID. Um, we were very focused on the taproom model in 20. Basically, we opened up in late 2017 and very focused on the taproom model in 2018 and 2019. And self-distro and just distro in general was on the roadmap and on the whiteboard, but the pandemic really forced us to figure it out much sooner than we had, planned on. And so yeah, so COVID hit, and we said, hey, we got to keep making beer. We started canning every drop, and basically turned one of our bar managers, who's a big beer guy. He said, I'd love to do sales for you guys. And so he built our self distro business, from sort of scratch, you know for all intents and purposes, from nothing pre-pandemic to, we're over, I think we might do more than $3 million in revenue this year in self distro. So it's been a really fun journey, and we've learned a lot.
So if there wasn't the focus early on, were there any wholesalers knocking on your door to rep you,
Not,
or?
not that early. Um, there are now, and we always entertain conversations, but not that early on. I think we had just, sort of a couple of years in, we're in the brand building phase. We took a lot of pride in getting to the festivals, and um, knowing the other breweries around the country that we loved and respected, and trying to learn from them, and you know um, figure out how to be like them. And so we really spent those first 2 years, and even during COVID, in like the brand building phase, like traveling and going to these festivals and trying to do collabs with other people. And then really got into the self distro piece, you know, as a necessity during COVID.
Yep.
Interesting. So you said you guys built it. Is that pretty common for like a brewery to just kind of like take it on and go, or like how would you
Yeah,
say?
I think a lot of us just sort of figure it out. If you make the decision to do self distro, um, at any point in your life cycle, you sort of just have to figure it out. We had one salesperson, John, and um, we bought, we bought our first truck in, late 2019, early 2020, and now we're up to 4 salespeople, one person in Raleigh. John, who handles a lot of our out of state distribution. And then we have 2 reps who cover sort of the triad parts of Charlotte, and then western part of Charlotte, and western North Carolina. And then we have 3 trucks and 3 drivers. So we send beer out on a truck literally every day. And but you know, it's crazy that it's not just running a manufacturing business making beer, but we're also figuring out how to run a logistics company, the
Oh
self-distro
yeah.
side as well.
That logistics part is, there's whole industries for it, right? There's whole industries, and to expect a brewery to learn it on the fly, there's no playbook.
Yeah.
There, you just have to rely on your buddies and your experience and figuring it out. It's so wild.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think, you know, a lot of people struggle with it, and a lot of people, you know, it's like, oh man, we're not even making any actual profit on the distro piece if you actually siloed it out as a separate company and really dug into those numbers. You know, man, you know, we got to sell X number of beer each month, each week
Mhm.
to actually make a profit. And you know, not surprisingly, as companies are in growth phases, there's, you know, you go through periods of losing money during that growth. And so we went through that in mid to late 2022 and early 2023. We put a lot of capex into our brewing system, more tanks, you know, silos to bring our cost of grain down, centrifuge so that we could, you know, improve our yields and, you know, get rid of the astringency in a lot of our hazy IPAs. And so we put a lot of money into that. You know, some of our production was down for a while. Our sales team didn't, you know, have as much beer to sell. And they were only one or two guys at that point. And then, you know, you're like, okay, sweet, we can make all this beer, but then you have to actually ramp up the sales. And
Yep.
so it's actually, you know, it's again, another huge learning curve for us. But I think in the past, we really started seeing a turn in April, May of last year, once we got through all that growth. And even more so, we're seeing it this year now that we have the rep in Raleigh. And, you know, it's not rocket science, but every business has a set level of sort of fixed costs that you need to cover. And however you get that revenue is important, whether it's high margin revenue or low margin revenue. If you can cover those fixed costs, it's just you know, the revenue coming in above that is pretty gravy. So we're now getting to that point where we feel pretty good, you know, on that piece. And I think our biggest challenge right now is getting into grocery stores, because that's where I think we will see a lot of our growth, and concentrating on core brands, getting into grocery. Grocery stores are hard to merchandise and you know, you got to be in there 3 or 4 times a week. So
Yep. Did you ever get out and sell early on?
yeah, me, Trobes, I mean, we were all trying to sell. You know, any time we would go to a bar or restaurant that, you know, did not have us on, you know, we chatted with a manager or somebody or an owner. We said, hey, you know, we're from Resident Culture. We'd love to be in here. And thankfully, by that time, we had a really good reputation in Charlotte.
Yep.
And people were like, oh my God, yeah, we'd love to have you. So the demand was certainly there. And that we feel very fortunate that that was the case.
I think it's so critical in most situations, the founders, co-founders had no choice but to sell early on. And I kind of preach as of late that the founders need to get back out there. And if they're seeing a decline, there's no one better than the founder to sell the brand and sell the story. So yeah. I'm glad to hear that you were out selling. Are there any funny stories that you experienced early on with being out on the streets selling?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm always taking a picture of whatever menu we're eating at a restaurant. I'm like, hey, can I see the menu? And if we're not on there, our sales manager, I think, probably gets a little bit of anxiety every time he gets a text from me at like 8 p.m. on a Friday night, because he knows he's probably going to be a picture of a menu in a place where we do not have our beer. But you know, some other stuff we've dealt with is a lot of places, you know, we try to limit the amount of half barrels we're selling because one, they're heavy as crap, and two, our margin on sixtels is a lot better. And so, but of course, the places that always seem to want half barrels are also always like on a second level place. So, and they never have anybody to help us get those half barrels up the stairs.
It's brutal.
You know, we were a more recent sort of snafu we went through is we got invited to go to Tokyo for McKellar Beer Celebration in Tokyo last year. You know, we're all excited. Everybody wants that invite in the industry because it's one, you know, this Tokyo and this, you know, McKellar has a great reputation. We've been going to their festival in Copenhagen for a handful of years now, and so, you know, we get our best beers, you know, the barrel aged stouts, our triple IPAs, all the stuff that, you know, everybody wants. And the pallet accidentally got shipped to Boston instead of Tokyo.
Oh my God.
And it had Creature Comforts beer on it too. Us and Creature Comforts actually had no beer at the festival. So
Oh no.
we traveled, you know, 6,000 miles across the world to go pour our beer, and we you know, we just got to be festival attendees.
Wow. That's a bummer,
tough.
man.
Yeah.
Hopefully
But
it was
the
a
beer
blessing in disguise.
the beer eventually got there. We ended up they ended up putting it in their bars around town and promoting that it was there. So
That's awesome, man.
yeah, it's never a dull moment.
No.
Yeah. So you're talking about costs and fixed costs, variable costs. I'm always amazed with the cost of running a fleet of vehicles, right? There is so much that goes into it. Do you guys purchase or lease your vehicles?
We actually own our vehicles. We bought them used from another large brewery here in Charlotte who had just gone with a distributor, and so they were selling some of their vehicles, and we bought a box truck and like a Transit 250, refrigerated Transit 250. Like we got both of them for 50 grand, and we had the cash, so we just decided to buy them. And you know, they've held up really well, and you know, I actually am pleasantly surprised with how we're doing. I mean, you know, we've had some issues here and there. Some guy actually lost control, not us, but a guy lost control and almost, you know, went head on and sort of ran into us. And so, you know, we've had some of those types of issues, but it's always, you know, they're branded and wrapped. And so it's, we view it a bit as sort of a marketing expense as well to be driving those trucks around town, because everybody's always like, "Ooh, I saw your truck," or they'll send me a picture of the resin culture truck driving around town.
Sure. So you would say over the last couple of years, maintenance on these vehicles have not been a thorn in your side. It's very doable.
No, I mean, the biggest expense has been these small little wrecks or fender benders, and whoever's insurance company really is the one that covers it. You know, we bought some vehicles that are actually like in decent shape, and no refrigeration issues really, and you know, no major, you know, out of pocket expenses rather than regular maintenance. So
yeah,
I would say, yeah, I'd say no. Yeah.
I know some of our other self-distro customers have had a lot of success with leased vehicles, because at any issue, right, you just go turn it in and they fix it. They'll give you a loaner, because they can also wrap the leased vehicles, right? They'll let them put whatever stickers they want on it, whatever wrap they want on it. But some of them have found that the maintenance costs, specifically in colder areas like Pacific Northwest, it's Northeast where it's snowy and nasty.
No, yeah.
The maintenance is just, it becomes too big, and the lease ends up working out because you're constantly taking it in for maintenance and fixing something. And there's thousands of pounds these things carry every single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, keeping up with all that.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. We're lucky being in Charlotte. We have 4 seasons, but it hadn't rained in 2 years, or hadn't snowed in 2 years, and
Right.
you know, it's relatively the climate is relatively easy on the cars. You know, no salt water and ocean air to mess things
Yeah.
up. So we feel lucky, and we just got such a good deal on purchasing these vehicles. You know, we use one to go between our warehouse and our brewery a lot. So, you know, we were actually renting a truck to do that. And it was 80, at the time it was $80 a pop for a 26-foot box truck. And now the rates have gone up to $150 a day. And it's not hard to do the math to know that you can just own your own box truck, and you come out better.
Yep.
Yep. So, like you guys were saying earlier, there's a whole industry devoted to doing what you have opted to do yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, like, what has surprised you as you've kind of gone on this journey? You've been doing it for a handful of years. Like, are there things that still come up that you're like, oh, or like, can you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, you understand why there's so many why there are so many distributors, because it's a hard business, and I think it's you understand the organization that it takes. John, our sales manager, has worked with different technologies trying to find the most efficient route to to go, and you plug in all the different locations you need to drop things off at, and they say, hey, go here, and here. Here's the route you need to take. This will actually, ends up saving you gas mileage, and it's saving you money. And we're still wrapping pallets by hand and all this. There's still even more technology and things that we could do. Eventually, maybe we do or not, but to lower our costs and whatnot. But it's sort of a never ending game of trying to figure it out. And you really do respect these other distributors, any size, from the smaller guys to the medium-sized guys to the Bud and the Miller Coors houses. You really respect the businesses they run after you've done it yourself.
Now, are you like diehard self-distro, or would you like does it cross your mind to change your model, or like would you recommend this to any brewery, or do you think there's certain criteria a brewery ought to have for it to make sense for them?
Yeah, I think look, I'm always open to having conversations, but I think we've heard a lot of stories of people who have just gone with a distributor off the bat, and they say, man, I wish we had done it ourselves. And we know a good friend of ours and locally is trying to get their rights back from the distributor they're working with. And that's just not something I think ever wanted to deal with. Now, we have been lucky enough to be able to build it sort of, from the ground up, and our team has done an amazing job. And I think what you realize is the control you have over it is important, and there's value to that.
For sure.
And when you hand your beer off to a third party to sell it and move it for you, you lose that control. So
Yeah, there's certainly pros and cons of working with a wholesaler. We have some customers that have an amazing relationship with their wholesaler. We have others that do not have an amazing relationship. There's an old adage out there that says it doesn't take a lot of cash to start a distributorship, but it takes a ton of cash to maintain a wholesale distributorship.
yeah.
And I think we're seeing that right now. We're seeing that right now across the board, where there's lots of independent distributors that are really struggling because of what's happening in the market. They have a ton of inventory just sitting there, and that inventory is cash that they've tied up. They've sent a check to the brewery, and they've got to sell that somewhere.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a squeeze there, and there's definitely an argument for the bigger guys, right? They've been around forever. I always say long arms, short arms, right? Baby arms and go gadget arms, right? The independent smaller distributors, their arms are only so long. They can only reach into so many coolers. The big guys, their arms are really long.
Yeah. Yeah. And you realize that the what the big guys have that the little guys don't is the placements and the planogram, and they sit down with whoever, at the grocery stores and say, I want to be here, and here's the brands I want in there. And it's just the nature of the size and the power these each guy has. But yeah,
they have the points of distribution, they have everything.
Yeah, and they have the efficiency that the little guys don't have too.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, we work really closely with Adam Robbings from Rubens, and he is the biggest proponent that if you choose to work with a wholesaler, it is a working relationship, partnership. And if you go in adversarial, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
It's never, ever going to work. If you go in nickel and diming, it's never going to work. It's really a marriage, a partnership, whatever you want to call it. And I think once the craft managers and above figure that out, that you're really there to work with them in tandem, then they totally come through for you.
Yeah. I mean, like the nickel and diming also doesn't really help because your margins are so depressed anyways that it's really a volume play. And the best way to get volume is to have amazing relationships with your distributor and the retailers, right? And so nobody can sell our beer better than we can. So
yeah, that leads into something I wanted to ask. Do you feel like you have a good grip on the profitability and your margins in your self-distro?
Yeah, I mean, not including if we're talking just pure cost of goods sold, so no labor, and just how we compute it, but our margins are great. They hover around 70% on self distro, and once we include labor and overhead and things like that, the margins are still pretty darn good for us. And we're always working to bring down our costs. And as a small brewery, one of the things you can't change is the size of your system and how long it takes to brew one batch of beer and how many employees it takes to brew that one batch of beer. That's essentially just a fixed cost for us. And then you calculate what that costs per case. And so we're exploring on some of our core brands. We've started having a friend of ours in the industry who has a ton of extra capacity, award-winning brewery who we trust wholeheartedly to brew our beer. We're starting to work with them to brew some of our flagship beers, and our cost, I think, is going to drop about 33%, including labor and overhead. So that's the type of stuff that'll just help us help that that extra cash go straight to the bottom line.
Yep.
Sure. Is there anything you wish you'd known going into it? Like think of it as advice for anyone listening who's like,
Yeah. I joke about this with some of our other friends. They're, in the industry. I would have paid the extra $100,000 on the system for it to be fully automated. I think the amount of labor you can save, and just efficiency in some of the, getting efficiencies out of your grain and, stuff like that, it can be really valuable if you have a more automated system. Our friends at Outer Range, I think you guys know them pretty well. They Lee jokes that there's a reason a lot of the breweries in Europe are these tiny little breweries. They're all fully automated, but because it's so hard to fire people in Europe, you don't want to deal with multiple employees of a fully manual brewery. So they just get an automated one. You can have one person do, one or two people run 5,000 barrels, and for us, that's 7 or 8 people. So
That's
I think
interesting.
the upfront expense of having a more automated system, I think, is probably worth it in the long run if you want to be brewing more than 1,000, 2,000 barrels of beer, for your tap room.
Yeah.
You
Has the choice to go self-distro held you back from anything, from growth, or has it presented any challenges you weren't expecting?
I think there obviously, growth is easier if if you're working with a company with 200 sales reps. But it's a double-edged sword, and one thing we've tried to do is really, it's cliche, but we want to find the best people to sell our beer. So we've been very lucky every time we've hired new sales reps. We've gotten amazing resumes from some of the better breweries, around town, and people with great experience. But yeah, Den was our first hire out of market. So, somebody living in a different, area of the state, selling our beer. And Raleigh's in county is just a huge beer market in North Carolina. And so we knew we needed somebody there. We had a lot of demand, and we were having one of our Charlotte guys drive there, or reach out to folks like once a week, twice a week or so. And we decided it made a lot more sense to have somebody local. So, hiring great people is a challenge.
Yep.
And, ramping them up. I talked to you early on. I said, hey, like, how much should our sales guys be selling? And it's like, your advice was like, it's going to take 6 to 8 months for them to ramp up, to the CEs that you should be expecting them to move. So, again, that's part of that sort of those growth pains of hiring a new person, deciding to do the self-distro ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
Advice to a brewery that's on the fence of deciding whether to try self-distro for a while or sign with a distributor. They got enough capacity to feed both. What would you advise?
I think I'd at least start out, on the self-distro side.
Yep.
There's a lot to learn, and I don't think we'd be where we are in terms of the quality of our brand and everything if we had initially signed with a distributor. And we have been able to control the supply demand dynamics of our own brand, and now that's I think there's a lot of value in that. And so if you just haven't you haven't signed or haven't done anything yet and you're a brand new brewery, I would definitely recommend doing it on your own for a little bit to learn the ins and outs and understand what works and what doesn't, how to talk to the retailers and how to have the good relationships. And and then you can, explore it later on. But I think the option will always be there if you make good liquid and you have a good brand.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. If you're lucky enough to be in a state that allows self-distro, give it a shot, try it out, get your shins beat up, and then you can bow out. But just handing the rights over automatically is tough.
Yeah.
There's
We
got to be
just feel
something
like
special there.
they're just the stories we've heard of people being like, man, I want my rights back.
Yeah.
And but they started out like they didn't do it themselves long enough, or they gave a portion of the state to somebody else immediately, and they just said, man, I just want them back. Like, we can be making more money, or they're not moving the amount of beer we think they can move. And so yeah.
Got it.
It's tough to lose control
Awesome.
over your brand like that. Would be hard.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and losing it off the bat, and when you're not even, I think, and people get down the road and don't realize what they gave up initially, or they realize it after the fact, what they've given up, instead of building it yourself, understanding the value and the importance of it, and then making that decision later on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Where can we learn more about Resident Culture?
Go to our website, residentculturebrewing.com. We're on Untapped. Visit us at the festival you go to. We don't go to as many festivals as we used to, saving on those travel costs.
Mm-hmm.
But we come visit us in our tap rooms, Charlotte, North Carolina. We're in Plaza Midwood, South End, and we have a small little bar set up in a food hall in Uptown Charlotte. So
Sweet, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you joining us today, Phillip. It was always a pleasure to talk to you, and your wealth of knowledge, man. I appreciate it.
happy to. Best of luck with everything, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the True Craft Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you are just dying to know what Chris and I look like, you can head over to YouTube for a video recording of the show. Links to cool information about our guests and other fun facts can be found in the show notes. This podcast is sponsored by Small Batch Standard, the premier financial agency built to serve the craft brewing industry. We help craft breweries grow profits through outsourced accounting, tax compliance, and growth consulting. Visit sbstandard.com today to learn more and request a discovery call.